think it's the thing they call like Stan or something. Like, but I don't know. I don't understand enough about it, so I'm not going to go on the
youth culture.
Damn kids! What are they talking about these days?
Welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair, a global Witcher podcast. My name is Alyssa from GoodMorhen, and I'll be your host as you, I, and our international hanza accompany Geralt of Rivia and his destiny, Cirilla of Cintra, across the continent. We've got something special to celebrate today. Welcome to the anniversary episode of Breakfast in Beauclair. On August 15th, 2019, the first episode of Breakfast in Beauclair released, and I could not have imagined the journey that first episode started. Thank you so much for joining me in our global community on the path. This episode, we welcome to our hanza our newest patrons, Yennefer, and our newest producer-level patron, Chris K. of Covier. This show could not be what it is without every member of our community who has supported the show over the last year. Thank you to our active and former patrons, Jameson, Olaf of Silesia, Bruno Arcelino, Alex Berner, Jamie of Thornton, Charlotte from Vengerberg Glamry, Louise of Covier, Red Kite, the owner of the Churlish Porpoise, Brett from Oxenfurt, Tommy of Vicavaro, who's not a Nilfgaardian, Mara the Gwen Addict, Reza of Covier, Christina Maria Vengerberg, Cool Guy Henry, Eric's the Godling, Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Gazetta, Jacob B., Jorgen from Skellige, Mahakam Elder Joe, Will C., Julie, Sylvia of Skellige, John of Riblia, Child of Elderblood, Eugene, aka Pony of Coins, Will P., Brandon, Rob the Butcher and Blaviken, Ray of Light, Howard Fagan Solis, April, Doug McCool, Ava of Gullet, Duncan D. McNuggets, Sebastian von Novigrad, Morgan, Jenna D. Mundilovich, B. Haven of the Edge of the World, Jacob Meeks, Steph, Jenny of Ard Skellig, Cynthia of Covier, Wesley, James of Cintra, the original Roach, Ariel Kitty, and Dustin. If you'd like to explore becoming a patron of the show, head over to patreon.com/breakfastinbeauclair. As for this episode, Christiaan from South Africa and Canada and Shaun from Northern Ireland call in for the first half of episode 104 of Banquets, Bastards, and Burials from Netflix's The Witcher. Join us as Yennefer's brush with an assassin interrupts her haze of disillusionment as Geralt becomes an honored guest at a royal banquet. Someone gains a child and someone loses one. We almost forget to discuss that Shrek scene, and I indulge my anniversary feels. In our mid-episode news segment, Tidings from Toussaint, Larson Wisherflix shares production news on Season 2. Spoiler alert, production's already started. Without further ado, let's get to the discussion for The Witcher episode 104 of Banquets, Bastards, and Burials Part 1. Welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair. My name's Alyssa, and joining us today are Shaun from Northern Ireland and Christiaan from South Africa and Canada. Hey guys.
Hello.
Hey Alyssa.
For both of you, it's your first time on the show. Welcome. Both of you are very active members of our hanza. Christiaan, you actually inherited your name or your pseudonym from a very early post on the show. And Shaun, you are also in our hanza cover for Toss a Coin to Your Witcher the day before the show came out. Do you guys mind introducing yourselves and telling our listeners a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, so thanks for the introduction. Yes, I am Christiaan, the owner of the Churlish Porpoise. Thank you for that, Alyssa. My Witcher background, I guess, started with the games, and then halfway through the games, I realized there's way too much lore. So I started buying the books and reading the books before I finished playing the games. And then, just found your podcast, which was actually the first kind of Witcher community or podcast that I was listened to started with GoodMorhen. Mm-hmm. That was really fun. And so here I am now, with a t-shirt over my head based on your recommendation.
It's very Padawan-like to my masterful,
yes,
my masterful 100%. Blanket fort.
Precisely, yes. I got to start somewhere.
But I'm glad that I can share my knowledge that Crisanto from episodes 6 and 7 bequeathed unto me, and I can then share it with you.
Humble beginnings of a t-shirt to the majestic forms of a blanket fort.
One day, maybe it'll go through its own Pokemon evolution.
100%. Yeah.
And Shaun, so as I said, you are also a very important part of our Hanza and very active. You were part of our Toss a Coin cover. I do remember the first time that we interacted, you sent me a very lovely message on Instagram that was really, really sweet, and we got to know each other that way as well. Do you mind introducing yourself too?
Yeah, sure. I'm Shaun. I'm 16. I'm just basically a student. I started with the games. I started with The Witcher 2 and stuff, like the video game, and from that, I played The Witcher 3, loved it. I just loved the whole universe, Geralt, everything. Then I realised, obviously, there was the whole books. I started picking them up and reading and absolutely loved Sapkowski's writings. That's when I saw on Instagram, because I was almost looking for a community then to share my thoughts with. And that's when I found the Breakfast in Beauclair podcast on Instagram and stuff. I just found it so cool that there was like this whole like community, and then there was like an actual podcast about it, and I just immediately was like listened to the first couple episodes of it, and I just, as you mentioned, I had to send my lovely little message over to the Instagram account. But yeah, I was very happy to find a community around it, and it was just made me more invested into the Witcher in general. So I think it's amazing. I think it's one of the best fantasy books and games, whatever, TV show now, of course, obviously. And yeah, here I am now.
I had a really big smile on my face, and now I'm about to cry.
Our fearless leader.
I have that effect on people.
The reason why I'm getting really emotional is a couple reasons. One, it's currently May 30th, only a couple days before season 2 starts. And kind of in this reflection, I've been going through a lot of my old journey when I wanted to start Breakfast in Beauclair. And one of my very close friends, I was digging through about 2 years of text messages to her in order to look for some stuff in particular that showed the growth of the podcast. My first message to her actually was, I think it was right about now. Oh, actually about a year before GoodMorhen. So August 5th, 2018,
wow.
I texted her, I'm entertaining the idea of launching a Witcher podcast now, so that when the Netflix series comes out in 2020 and people become obsessed with it, I will have already SEO strength and dominated the internet. And then I said, but actionably, could I interest you in reading a single chapter from the short story book and discussing it for a pilot? I texted her, I guess this must have been like a month later. And I said, I'm having difficulty finding guests for the podcast I want to launch. Ideally, I wanted to create a short introduction with just me, followed by 1 to 3 episodes with guests I could use to cold pitch to people on Twitter, YouTube, and Reddit. And then I messaged her almost a year later on May 24th, 2019. So this is basically a year ago today, before the podcast came out. She messaged me, the GoodMorhen feed looks, and then she put a big fire emoji. And then I said, thank you. And then I followed up with a second message. Also, I want to seriously explore the podcast again. So that was May 24th, 2019. So that was about a year ago today. And I was digging through all these messages like last night at like 2 a.m, which I shouldn't have been doing. Both of you mentioned the community, and I did as well. And that really has been the driving force of this show and the purpose we're doing it. It's super weird, and it makes me very emotional to kind of get that reminder of where I was in the struggle that I had with trying to engage people in New York to do this with me. And then to see, 2 years later, just the global community that has been a part of this and the kind of love that everyone has for each other, despite distance. And it just makes me feel so good.
Good work. Good work.
Yeah, like I genuinely have like so much respect for you, because like you just decided to start this, you wanted to connect with the community. Like, would you ever have thought like 2 years down the line that we could have a cover out and the actor of Jaskier and the composers of the TV show would have seen it and complimented it and stuff? Like, it's crazy how much you've actually built up the community, and like we're able to connect people globally. So it's incredibly like inspiring. So it is.
Well, now I'm happy and sad. It's, man, this has been such an interesting journey. As I said, we're about 4 or 5 days out from, the start of season 2. But man, it's a really interesting reflection. I'm wiping away not tears, but tearing. Yeah, this has been a very fun ride, and I'm really grateful that you guys are a part of it. I'm really blown away by the community and by people that are interested. When I was actually reaching out to everyone who had inquired about being on the show, it was amazing to me that everyone is incredibly isolated and they have a lot of passion. They don't really have any friends locally who are also in this fandom, for example. But then it became more than the actual fandom, which blew my mind, and it has the potential to continue down that track. I really do believe that The Witcher just ended up being the right place for this. I took a lot of time before I started the show to think about, like, am I the right person to be doing this? I wanted to engage other people, and when I thought about whether or not I'd be the right person for this, it's like, well, I'm not necessarily the right person by myself, but I'm the right person to build a community with purpose because I just had the nerve to do it. I think that's the only credit that I can give to myself. I just had the nerve to start. I don't know, like I'm just really glad that it's brought people together in such a way. But yeah.
Well, as am I, so thanks very much. Yeah. You made it look so attractive that it's like, you put a whole new spin on the whole Witcher universe. So kudos. Well done.
Anyway, so that ended up being an introduction to me.
It's all raise a glass.
Crying 15 minutes on this. What's it going to be like at the end?
I know, what the heck? I think it's only been 10 minutes. Is there anything that I think you guys would like to see for the future of this community, considering that you're such an integral part of it?
Shaun?
For me, I'd like to see The Witcher get to, like, I know it's already huge and so many people are in love with the games and books, and even now the TV show, people love it and stuff, but I would love to see it on, like, that monumental level of, like, Tolkien sort of Lord of the Rings sort of, where it's just so globally kind of respected. I would really like people to have the same feelings the way they do towards, like, some of the biggest ones out there, the same way they would toward The Witcher. So I'd like to see it up there as the best, because I mean, it really is. It's amazing. It's an amazing community, amazing, like, stories, and I love it. I do. I absolutely love it.
For me, as far as the Breakfast in Beauclair community, I think, Alyssa, just keep doing what you're doing, man. Everybody out there, like you said, is looking for some kind of outlet because they don't have somebody to talk to about it. So you've given a space for everybody to voice their opinions and their love and their likes and dislikes. So, I mean, yeah, just keep on keeping it on. It's really amazing. And thanks that we can be a part of it. That's really stunning.
Yeah.
No, it's like truly my honor that people like you are interested in the work that I'm producing, and you guys actually care to be part of a community like this. I'm very happy with the people that have gravitated toward this. Yeah, I feel very wholesome. Like, I just have this very wholesome, bubbly feeling.
I can hear it in your voice. Yeah, well done.
It's just also very humid and hot in this blanket fort. There's like 4 layers of blankets on this. Woo! All right.
I mean, yeah, I'm sweating and I just have a t-shirt, so I feel you.
Oh, man. My legs are outside of it, though, so...
Temperature control? I don't know. Are you one of those people when you sleep, your feet have to be out of the blanket?
Sometimes. Certainly sometimes.
That's my temperature control, for sure. If it's too hot, they go outside. If it's too cold, they're inside.
Today we'll be discussing Of Banquets, Bastards, and Burials, the 4th episode in Netflix's first season of The Witcher. This episode adapts Andrzej Sapkowski's short story A Question of Price from The Last Wish, in which Geralt is called upon to save a royal marriage. Yennefer, disillusioned by her time at Adorn's court, must put aside her resentment to save Queen Callis of Lyria from assassination. In the present, Ciri and Dara enter Brokilon Forest, the home of the Dryads. In the opening scenes of Yennefer's storyline, the sorceress escorts Queen Callis of Lyria. Their wagon is attacked, and Yennefer opens a portal for the queen, a guard, and herself to escape.
I think this is, like, a good start. I mean, we see Yennefer at the very start, obviously, and she's having the conversation with the queen. Obviously, she's, like, bored, and she's explaining to her, like, she loves it that she gave up everything to get power, but she's like, this is not what I wanted. This is not what I was meant to do.
Yeah, because how long was she doing that? Didn't she mention a few decades or something like that?
3 decades, I believe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see why Yennefer's so fed up with, like, almost being just, like, playthings in a game of chess or something. She's literally just there to protect people, give her opinion, which is often not listened to.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you can see why she's fed up.
I'm sure she just feels like an accessory, another thing to add to the collection.
And it certainly shows a very long journey. In the last scene of the last episode, Betrayer Moon, she entered this Aretuza. It's not a debutante ball, but that's kind of what it feels like. And she was presented to the King of Aedirn, or rather she just stole the King of Aedirn and shimmied her way into his court. So there's a lot of character development that we don't see, but that we can infer between the end of episode 3 and the beginning of episode 4. We get all of that in just her demeanor alone. So it's pretty cool to see what Anya Chalotra was able to do with the different phases of Yennefer's lifetime.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a big jump from seeing her so young and how she was so ready to go off to courts and be the court mage and stuff. And she was so excited to do that. And then you see literally just the next episode. Obviously, it's a big jump in time, but it's a quick turn on how her opinions change over the years. It's not what she wants anymore, and she's done with it, really.
And then we actually get to the person who's with her, Queen Callis, right? Queen Callis is an original character for the show, as far as I think we know in terms of lore. She's from Lyria. Yennefer is escorting Queen Callis back to Lyria, I believe from Aedirn, but I'm not sure if that's totally clear. So while they're talking, again, we get a little bit more of Yennefer's disillusionment, and Callis says she says some callous things to her.
No.
You can tell I'm in a good mood now. She insists that Yennefer airs her grievances, and then she does. And then Callis says, well, I have it worse. Yennefer's just like, ugh. So I think this does a lot in setting up assumptions about the characters. So we assume that Callis is, one, rather protected, that she's kind of haughty and has her own little bubble of perception. And I think we'll continue to see that throughout the episode, that she just can't really imagine anything outside of what has happened to her, outside of her own experiences.
Yeah, and then obviously there's the attack then. And it's kind of funny how she's just if only life wasn't so boring. And then it just completely shakes that up.
Life is outside saying yes, you wanted some excitement? Here you go.
This is the monkey paw.
Yeah, Destiny was just giving it there. It's just you know what, you wanted it, take it.
Her cart is attacked. As we find out, all the guards are killed outside, save one, and there's an assassin waiting for Callis and Yennefer. So they escape. Yennefer opens a portal, and all of them jump through.
It's definitely an interesting thing to see, how powerful they are. Just one assassin, whatever creature, I don't know the name of the creature, but the creature he had was able to take down the entire escort of guards with pretty much no challenge at all. Mm-hmm. So you can really see how powerful magic users are in the continent.
Adding to that, Shaun, this is also the first... Well, no, don't quote me on that. But it's an introduction to the darker side of magic that this world also possesses. Mm-hmm. It's not just magic for your own benefit of doing this and doing that and the political side of right and wrong. But then you've got this evil, mysterious, unknown force that magic can be used for evil as well. And I think it was important for the show itself just to show how broad the magic and how important the theme of magic is in the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gives you a term of the stuff people will do basically for cash or money, I suppose, coin, whatever. Everything is, how can I advance my upstanding or my wealth or whatever would make some coin will do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Even as I was thinking it through myself, I think you're right. This must be the first real magical battle we're seeing. I think the expressions of magic that we saw throughout the first 3 episodes was Stregabor's illusions in the tower. We saw obviously magic as Yennefer's learning it, but nothing combative. Yeah, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only thing I think is you would barely even call it, but Geralt using the signs, but apparently that's a lesser version of magic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the only time we see it during combat. Really, is when Geralt used it.
It's definitely interesting. Obviously, it doesn't compare to the magic that we'll see in episode 8 in the final fight, but even just introduction to things like portals, there's some sort of connection. We can probably assume it's magical between this monster and this assassin, but we don't really start to see the fury and the fight that happens decades later by the time we get to episode 8. So it does, I think, prime the audience really well for the possibilities.
It was a little detail, obviously, but I noticed it when I was rewatching through it. They show you the kind of effect the portals have on people as well, because when the queen goes through the portals, she throws up when she comes out of them. Mm-hmm. It kind of shows you the effect it has on people that obviously aren't used to magic and going through portals, because it's obviously not a very normal experience to go from one location instantly to another.
What do you mean?
Yeah, we're all used to it.
Yeah, that actually is a nice segue into the following scenes as well. The next few scenes happen rather rapidly throughout Yennefer's timeline. Yennefer and Callus pass through a desert where their last guard is killed, and then a rainy town before being cornered on a mountainside. Yennefer escapes, leaving Callus behind. Yennefer returns, attempting to save the queen and baby. Both are killed. Yennefer flees to a beach where she discovers the child is dead. There's a lot of energy through these scenes. They're obviously being chased. There's an immediacy to the kind of danger that they're in and an urgency to escape it, which I think these scenes do really well. And as we kind of spoke about briefly, they also show a lot of the effects of magic. A really small detail when I was watching the episode this morning, in the very last stand between Yennefer, the creature, and this assassin, when she's finally opening that last portal, there's a close shot of her hands, and I don't think that it's, dirt from running and escaping through all these different environments. It looks like the life force is being drawn out of her hands the way that it happened to Fringilla in episode 2. Obviously, I can't exactly confirm that, but it's something that I noticed. If it is true that that's actually her use of magic that's doing that to her, again, it shows the amount of effort that she's putting into saving them and saving herself, which I think is a far cry from her apathy in the beginning of the episode.
Another thing to back that up is in the rainy town when she opens the portal, she's doing two magic things at the one go. So she's like slowing down time to stop the bug from killing them, but she's opening a portal as well. And you hear her, she like screams out in pain. She's like, go, I can't hold it like much longer.
Oh yeah, she's in agony.
It shows how powerful Yennefer is, but it also shows how much willpower it takes to do stuff such as that.
Yeah. Christian, did you have any thoughts on this chase scene?
The chase scene, friggin' good. It was really well done. Yeah. It's, like you said, a lot of energy. It was so much fun to watch because you were just sitting on the edge of your couch or wherever you are. Yeah, it's powerful, it's strong, there's fast-paced. It's like a car chase, but with magic. So I enjoyed it tons, yeah. As you said later on, it's kind of like the struggle where she leaves and then comes back to slaughter the creature. That was interesting as well, just that whole scene, that whole inner dialogue that she's having with herself, just the thoughts of like, oh, did I do the right thing? What am I doing? What is the right thing? I should be looking out for myself, but I can't help but feel this guilt.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think it was like a time where it was definitely showing Yennefer's like morals. She wanted to save herself because she knew it was, he was a very powerful mage, but you could still see she still had empathy for the child because she was like, it's not their fault, it's not the child's fault for being there,
And this is, like we were saying, like this is 30 years, right, of service where she's in the prime of her life and then not being able to have a baby, which is the main topic, I think, for Yennefer's storyline. Is, her paternal instincts that are just null and void at this point.
Yeah. We got to see Yennefer's morality shape and how, I guess, she prioritizes herself and looks at the world, how she views her self-esteem, I think is something that we talked about extensively in episode 2, 4 marks. So it's interesting to see her now, how she values herself, how she values others, especially in a point of conflict when that's tested. Particularly, Callus turns out to be kind of a bitch.
Yeah.
When they were going through the desert, Yennefer brought up the fact that she must have run out of time, as she puts it, to give her husband a male heir. Callus can't even fathom that for a minute, and then she calls him a prick or something. When she's really confronted at the edge of this mountainside, she actually offers her child to the assassin in exchange for her own life, and then that's when the assassin throws a blade and ultimately slashes her neck. Again, I think Callus's selfishness is contrasted well with Yennefer's more ethical actions. I mean, more ethical, but we see how the actions of that child's mother, her biological mother, are contrasted with Yennefer's attempts to save them.
You saw how much energy Yennefer had to do to get them out of there and get them safe. She spent so much power getting them out of there, and then even when they're out on the last place where she gets killed and stuff, she tells her get up mage or get up sorceress. She's demanding her even though she just saved her life. That's why Yennefer obviously leaves, even just to see her give up her child just so that she can live. I mean, we just see how dark some people are in the continent and the world of The Witcher. Yeah, it's definitely in contrast to Yennefer obviously risking her life to come back to save the child, I thought it was kind of funny, the part where she's just like, Yennefer looks like she's about to teleport them out of there, and then she just like teleports herself out. Thought it was a pretty funny scene, and then she calls her like a horrible, useless bitch or something, and it's just like, it's just funny. It was a good humorous scene.
I guess the last thing that I want to touch upon is just like the idea of an assassin like this in the Witcher world, as far as I can remember, doesn't have any precedence in the books. Magical assassins like this, aside from maybe some instances in the games, I can't really think of a similar instance, or at least not quite like this.
Yeah, they don't really focus a lot about it in like the book, mostly because like you've seen how quickly the mage was able to kill the queen and stuff. It's almost like it's not even worth their time. They're so much more powerful.
Oh, it's so petty. Yeah.
Yeah, and they could go off and be an advisor to a king and be earning so much more. So it's not even really worth their time.
Yeah. Okay, so here's my thing. When I saw this creature, I immediately thought about the insect-like creatures in Season of Storms. I think I read a bunch of things like lore guys, and they were like, it's not the same, but it kind of draws inspiration from that, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that read the books, they thought it was like an existing creature, but I think they might have made up their own one for the TV show.
I think that was confirmed, yeah.
Yeah, I think the overall thought is just that it's a killing beast, really.
And that was also so shocking for us as, like, you know, hardcore Witcher fans. We're like, whoa, what is this? Who's this? That's cool.
Yeah. You know, thinking about the other monsters that we see in the show, or I guess the Kikimora in episode 1, they kind of made it bug-like as well. It's very spider-like.
Yeah.
But there's something about this one that's like truly like, it's got, you know, what is the word for bug armor?
Scaly armor?
An exoskeleton.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got an exoskeleton. The way that it moves is both like crab-like and bug-like.
Just also the sheer size of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fascinating creature, and I think for its purpose on the show as an assassin's companion, I think that it definitely looks the part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it definitely fits into the bestiary of The Witcher anyways.
Like, it's got knives for hands. Like,
How much more, like, scary can you get from that?
yeah.
Yeah. Straight to the kitchen with you, bug boy.
Oh, man. Maybe its name is Edward.
Yeah, maybe it's just a really peaceful creature.
It's Edward Scissorhands. So stupid. Yeah. So, I mean, on that note, in the next scene, it gets significantly more somber because Yennefer ends up on this beach after escaping this assassin. When she's about to go through the portal, the assassin throws a knife, and it looks like it might go through her, but it definitely goes through the baby. So when she gets to the beach, she discovers the child is dead. And then the following scenes, she's sitting on the beach, eulogizing the baby, and then buries it in the sand.
It's definitely like a sad scene. Obviously, she was like eulogizing the baby's death, but it's showing like Yennefer just reflecting on herself as well, and just like what she's been through, and she's really just debating life and thinking like, is it worth it? Like, is it worth what I'm going through? Like,
you know, it's interesting because when Lars and I went to Luca in October 2019, so about 2 months before the show actually aired, they showed 3 different clips of the show, one for Geralt, one for Ciri, and one for Yennefer. And this is the one that they showed for Yennefer. So this was personally my first introduction to this adaptation of the character. And I was surprised, like, honestly, because there's such a deep level of vulnerability that Anya brings to this scene. And it's very beautifully done. Obviously, I had no context for what was happening because this isn't a scene that appears in the books, of course. But I think that it shows a very different depth to Yennefer's character because she's by herself. It makes it a really interesting monologue.
yeah, she's very vulnerable in that moment because there's no one around. She's very like fragile and just letting everything out, which is obviously not Yennefer's casual style, or from the one we know from the books, really. She's obviously a very demanding and strong character, really. She doesn't like to share her feelings very often, but it was nice to see her. Like, obviously she was by herself and she was just letting everything go, so it was good to see her in a fragile state at some point. See her real, true morals like down below the scaly exterior.
Yeah, she was vulnerable. She was exhausted, you know, after all that effort. Overcome with emotion and realization of some personal stuff, but also just the way the world works as well.
And, you know, this must be compounding like maybe about 50 years of her own feelings. She was first brought to Aretusa supposedly when she was 14. So it's been a very long time since then, and she brings up her parents. She brings up her family, she brings up her friends, and any previous lovers that she had had, and expresses disappointment with all of them. It's interesting to see how much, I guess, hope she had toward the beginning of her journey, particularly in episode 3 in the last episode, and how much of her world's outlook has shifted since then.
Like, she'd always been disappointed, like, her parents and stuff, and like she says, like, she tried lovers and they were fun for a while, but at the end they were still disappointing. She's almost like said, like, I've tried everything and I'm done. I just want to do it myself now.
And having said that, I made a note here where she's been frivolous, she's been gallivanting around the world doing God knows what. I made a note, and it's pretty far-fetched, but it just came to mind, where it says maybe she tried to take that baby as her own adoptive daughter because, you know, she's done with the world. She's ready to settle down, you know, or she's sick of it. Maybe she isn't ready, but she just doesn't know where she's at. And I think there's a lot of confusion within herself and with me as well, obviously, as we can hear. But yeah, I thought it just came to mind when I was prepping for the show. Who knows?
You know, if it's true, part of that decision to want a child, there's a few clues that we start to get here that'll be much more important on the next couple of episodes 5, 6 in particular. But when she's on this beach and she's talking to this dead baby, she's talking about how, as women, you're a vessel. You're a vessel for them to take and take and take until you're empty. When I was watching that, I wondered, because Callus put a lot of emphasis on that she's only valued because she can produce children. So I was wondering if Yennefer, if she talked about herself being a vessel and then her usefulness as a vessel was taken away by her decision to go through with her changes, to have like her uterus taken out in exchange for her powers, if she feels that, you know, if she's not valuable in court, if she's not valuable as a mage, and she doesn't have any traditional use as like a bearer of children, then what use does she have? That's something that I was thinking about this morning.
Yeah, I would argue that probably this moment where she's on the beach is actually like the moment where that want to have the ability to have children again kicks in, because she's talking about how she's disappointed with everything she's done so far. And if you think about it, having a child is probably one of the only things Yennefer hasn't done. It's almost like that's her last hope, that she can find some comfort or some sort of relievement with her life. And that's the thing she wants to gain back. Because obviously they say it's impossible to get it back, you know, like that's the consequence for becoming a mage or whatever and having that much power. But obviously Yennefer thinks differently, and she thinks there is a way that she can take on the ability to have children again. And I think the scene here is probably where that instinct kicks in, where that's where she wants to have a child. So
yeah, and she talks about that really explicitly in the beginning of the episode when she's talking to Callus in the cart. She says she thought her time at Aedirn would be her legacy, like to be the greatest mage to grace a king's court would be her legacy, and ultimately she feels that it wasn't. So I would agree that like the idea of legacy being a child, being a family to leave behind, yeah, I could see this being a starting point for that ideal. Did you guys have any other thoughts on this? I think the last thing that I wanted to note was that she didn't use magic to bury the baby, just her hands.
It's not a criticism or anything. I just seen it on like the internet, and I kind of just laughed about it. It was like she buried the child like a foot deep under the sand, and they were like, "That's not a good idea in the world of The Witcher, where there's like drowners and stuff." But I understand the whole scene was that she doesn't use her magic, and it's like the human side of Yennefer, where she just dug the hole by herself and showing Yennefer's more timid side.
Yeah, that was something that I thought about as well. Yennefer doesn't use magic to bury the baby. Instead, she uses her own hands. That could be because she's incredibly tired, but it could also be just for the sake of physical labor to show respect, I suppose. Yeah, I was like, it's low tide and that baby's only a foot under there. Like, as soon as the tide comes in, that baby's floating away.
It's drowner than her now, so it is.
Yeah. I was like, but it's interesting because this better not be a spoiler because it's been like 20 freaking years. But, we see a similar scene in the Harry Potter series, for example.
Yes.
In the final book, when Harry buries Dobby. If you haven't gotten that far, like, I have nothing to say to you. So,
Whoops.
You just spoiled Harry Potter for me.
Yeah, so this isn't really a spoiler, I suppose. But so there's this whole really beautiful scene where this house elf, Dobby, if you're unfamiliar with the series, sacrifices himself in order to save the main character, Harry Potter. out of respect and repentance, I think, and out of anger and sadness, Harry goes out to the yard and he wants to bury this house elf with his own hands. But it's a very moving scene. It's a very profound scene. And that was one of the things that I thought about here when I saw this with Yennefer and when she chose not to use magic.
I agree. I think the whole idea was to show the respect more and how she could do it easily with magic in a few seconds, but she decided to, put in the effort and do it with her own hands to show the respect for obviously a dead child.
That pretty much takes us to the end of Yennefer's storyline in this episode. Did you guys have any closing thoughts on how it developed her character between Aretuza and the next episode? And what do you guys think this episode did for Yennefer's character?
To me, I think it was the final breaking point that turns Yennefer into the one that obviously we know in the later books and the main saga and stuff, because it really is the last strike for her. And then that's where she becomes this person that's I don't care what you have to say, I'm doing this for me. She's the sorceress we all know then. It really gave her a tough outer shield, and it's she doesn't care anymore. It's about her. That's it. I think that was really the last breaking point to where she became the sorceress we all know.
For me, honestly, I think we nailed it on the head with everything we discussed. It was a great character development for Yennefer. I made a note towards the bottom, and I think I'll just read it right now, actually, if you don't mind. It gives viewers a glance into how desperate she is for change, if it's to have a child or if it's to experience something new. And later on, it also just highlights or emphasizes her anger towards Aretuza for taking the one thing she has as a woman away from her. A big sacrifice for something else that she now regrets,
Yeah. I think both of you are absolutely correct. This ends up being a very decisive turning point, and I think a checkpoint in where Yennefer is between Aretuza and where we'll see her in future episodes. This is one of the last times that we'll see her as a very independent character prior to her meeting Geralt. I think that it says a lot about who she is when the Witcher ultimately steps into her life. Speaking of, that does take us to Geralt's storyline in this 4th episode. Before we get to Geralt's storyline, we're going to hand it over to Lars from Witcherflix for recent news on the Netflix show. When we come back, Christiaan, Shaun, and I will continue our discussion of Banquets, Bastards, and Burials.
Hey, it's Lars from Witcherflix, and this is Tidings from Toussaint. Welcome back, everybody. Good news. The filming for Season 2 has finally continued. On August 12th, director Steven Surgic has posted a picture on Instagram that proves that the cameras are rolling again. This is absolutely great. But there's still a few more pieces of news to report. So let's jump right into it. The preparation for the restart of the shooting is well on its way. Several cast members like showrunner Lauren Hisrick or actors like Freya Elm, Macia Simpson, who will play the elven sorceress Francesca Finderbear in Season 2, or Paul Ballion, who will be the Witcher Lambert, have posted pictures preparing for the filming. Lauren has already visited the set and met with her Season 2 directors like Sarah O'Gorman or Steven Surgic to talk the filming process, all while wearing a face mask and social distance. According to Redanian intelligence, during the filming for Season 2, every crew member will be tested for the coronavirus at least twice a week, maybe more. Moreover, Redanian intelligence reports that several new characters are being cast for Season 2 at the moment. An audition tape by actor Edward Rowe was released where he speaks for a character simply named D. This character is a hardened warrior who knows how to kill. D is another code name, so it's hard to guess which book character this could be. It might also be an entirely new character. Redanian intelligence revealed 2 more cast members appearing in the next season. First, there is Tim Samuels, who will play a newly created and unknown character named Elad. The second addition is actress Anya Marson, who has an acting career of more than 60 years. We don't know her character yet, but Redanian intelligence speculates that based on her age, she could play a wise old character like Ithleen, the elven prophet. In other news, Witcher director Sarah O'Gorman was asked in an interview for winteriscoming.net about what we can expect in Season 2. Unfortunately, she couldn't reveal a lot. She said, "This is tricky. I can tell you what showrunner Lauren Hiswick has already revealed, which is the timeline is going to be linear. We have our 3 main characters, Yen, Geralt, and Ciri, on their journeys. I read the scripts before it was out, and it's really exciting. It has the mix of mythical monsters with those big set pieces, but with the big emotional journeys, which is what I find appealing." Anyway, guys, that's it for me for today. A little shorter than usual, but we can expect great things to come now that the filming continues. I hope you all stay safe and well. We talk again in the next episode of Breakfast in Beauclair. Until then, thanks again for listening and good luck on the path.
Hey everyone, welcome back from the break. I'm here with Christiaan and Shaun discussing Of Banquets, Bastards and Burials from Season 1 of Netflix's The Witcher. When we left off, we had discussed Yennefer's brush with a magical assassin, and now we'll jump into Geralt's storyline. In his storyline, Geralt attends a marriage banquet in Cintra under the guise of being Jaskier's personal guard. An unexpected guest arrives, causing the banquet to fall into chaos. The opening scene of this storyline is quite funny. A crowded tavern mourns the loss of the Witcher to Jaskier's amusement. Ultimately, Geralt wanders back in, to the surprise of all of the people in the tavern. And later, as Geralt bathes, Jaskier pleads with him to attend a Cintran marriage banquet as his guard.
I've mentioned these before. Geralt and Jaskier are my two favorites, especially just their relationship they have with each other. It's kind of like the just funny friends. It's so funny to see, he's writing down when the guy's describing what happened to Geralt. And he's like, he's alright. And he's like, I was there, he's dead. And it's just it's a funny scene. So
Yeah, it was good. It's the laugh that you need in a very serious, somber kind of episode.
Yeah.
And a triumphant return for Jaskier as well. So the first and last time that we saw him was in episode 2, 4 Marks, where he and Geralt traveled to the edge of the world and he created the infamous song Toss a Coin to Your Witcher, which we see reprised here in this scene. There's clearly been, as we saw in Yennefer's scene, significant relationship change between Jaskier and Geralt since the last time that we saw him in episode 2. So they're clearly at least friendly now. They're pals. Apparently, Jaskier spends his evenings rubbing chamomile on Geralt's butt. So they're clearly, friendly. They're mates. And then we've since seen, at least me on Twitter, I've seen the Twitter boom explode with Jaskier and Geralt's fan art of the erotic nature.
Yes, I do not get that in fan bases and stuff.
Yeah,
I definitely wasn't picking up any vibes really.
I mean, to be fair, Jaskier is quite flamboyant. Yeah. I think we as book readers know that he is very clearly a womanizer, and there is no romantic tension between Geralt and Jaskier in the books. But to be fair, I think Joey Beatty did play him in a way that there was this adoration toward Geralt. There was this kind of pining toward Geralt. I don't necessarily think it was romantic, but I do think it was enough for those fan art creators to latch onto.
Yeah.
It happens in every fandom, I think, as you said.
Yeah.
It does, yeah.
But I'm always amused when it floats across my Twitter feed. But I do think that Joey Beatty did a really lovely job of bringing Jaskier to screen. So I think, regardless of, I think it does bring people to the fandom, clearly. So it is nice to see such an open reception to his characterization of the character.
Agreed.
As I said, the big plot point here, though, between these first few scenes is that it sets us up for the rest of the episode. This is the call to action. Jaskier invites Geralt to the Cintran banquet as his guard, supposedly because, as Jaskier does, he's slept with numerous amounts of women. He says sometimes wives, sometimes daughters, sometimes even mothers. So there are definitely going to be people at this banquet who are out for his head.
Yeah.
In the next few scenes, Geralt and Jaskier arrive at the Cintran Palace. Geralt reunites with the druid Mousesack, before entertaining the guests at the banquet, curbing stories and rumors about himself. Calanthe, who we met in previous episodes, arrives at this banquet, eventually getting a chance to speak to Geralt herself at the high table. In the course of the night, a representative from Nilfgaard is laughed out of the banquet.
Yeah, a lot to talk about here, but I just love all the scenes to do with Geralt and Jaskier, because a lot of them are humorous. They're just quite funny to see. He walks in, Dandelion, I was about to call him. Jaskier says, keep a low profile, we don't want anyone knowing. And then you just hear Mousesack shout out, Geralt! But yeah, it's funny scenes. Yeah, there's a lot happens. I mean, this whole storyline with Geralt is obviously the main point of the whole episode. It's a really important part of Geralt's story, but just in this part right here, it's kind of funny to do with the whole Nilfgaardian stuff as well, and how she just completely takes the hand out of them in front of everyone, further embarrassing Nilfgaard, contrasting what happens 30 years, 40 years down the line or whatever.
There is like a really funny thing about that opening with Mousak and Geralt as well. So as I said, when we're recording this, it's currently May 30th, but we actually recorded this for the first time on February 9th, about like 4 months ago. So we are re-recording this episode because I changed the structure.
And we're just having so much fun. Yeah, that's right.
I think we are having a lot more fun this time. We had a lot of fun the first time, but we didn't start with me crying 10 minutes into the episode last time. But none of us could have predicted the state of the world back when we recorded this episode. But since then, there's a line here that Mousak says, "I haven't seen you since the plague."
Yes, I love that.
The writer for this episode, Declan DeBarra, he posted on Twitter, people have told him like, "Oh, something that you wrote went viral." And he's like, "Ooh, what?" And then it's like a very sad face. And then it's just a screenshot of Mousak saying, "I haven't seen you since the plague." They're relating to our situation with COVID now. So when we record this in February, we didn't have anything to say about that line, but now we do. So fun updates 4 months later.
I loved it. When I saw that that meme, I just housed myself. I was like, oh, this is brilliant.
Yeah, that's when you know you've made it, when there's memes about it.
This is the kind of pop culture significance that we wanted for our fandom.
Yeah.
We're introduced to a number of major players in these banquet scenes. We're walking in with Geralt and Jaskier. We meet Mousak, who is a druid from Skellige. We're briefly told about Crack-on Crate, the bard Dragbon Dew. These are characters who appear in the books, but we just don't really get to interact with them too much in the show. We see Calanthe again, who we met in episode 1, The End's Beginning, when she was much later on in her life. And then we meet Ice Terciac, who's the uncle of Crack-on Crate and also representative from Skellige. And then we meet Pavetta, who is the daughter of Calanthe. And she is at this banquet table. This banquet is for her specifically, and she's deeply unhappy to be there, and we don't know why yet.
You can see when Calanthe goes up to talk with Pavetta, she's like holding back her tears because she obviously doesn't want to cry in front of everyone, but you can see how much like Calanthe feels sad for her, but she wants her to know like she was the same. Like, she knows that, like, the pain she's going through, and she's like, "Did you think I want to marry your father? You can have who you want after you're married and stuff." So she's basically trying to cheer her up, but she's telling her, like, don't cry in front of all these people. It'll, ruin reputations and stuff. And she does feel bad for her, but she can't show too much pity, really.
Yeah, because, like, with that badass entrance that they had Calanthe do, smeared in blood, covered in full plate armor, it was an amazing introduction, I think.
Yeah, and I think consistent with her character that we saw in episode 1 as well. We did see her at the Battle of Marnadal in episode 1. So for her to say that she had spent the afternoon before her daughter's banquet taking care of uprisings in the south very casually, and then she just changes into more formal wear. I think it's very consistent with the character that we saw and possibly alludes to very little character development between these earlier scenes that we're seeing in episode 4 compared to her death in episode 1.
Yeah, and another thing I forgot as well, just to mention, was the whole thing with Jaskier and stuff. The guy approaches him and he's like, "I know your face, I know your face," and stuff. And Geralt's like, "No, you've got the wrong person." He was kicked by, what was it he says?
By an ox.
Yeah, an ox when he was like a boy, and he's like, "Oh, take a coin, take a coin." This is, another scene of just their friendship, really.
Yeah, it's actually not his face that he recognizes. He tells him to pull down his pants because he'd recognize that pimply bottom anywhere.
Yeah, and then Jaskier is almost like, "What? No, my bum's not pimply. What are you talking about?"
The short exchange also shows Geralt's humor. We see this a ton throughout the books, and even a little bit in the games. We're really starting to dig into who Geralt is now that we've spent a number of episodes with him. Actually seeing him relatively comfortable, not under immediate threat, we're starting to see a little bit more of his character and of his humor. He has a look of amusement on his face as he's telling the very sad tale of Jaskier the eunuch.
Yeah.
So as you said, Christian, we get a really wonderful entrance for Calanthe in this episode. We also hear about her animosity toward elves, and this is going to be important in series timeline later in this episode. But for the moment, there's two exchanges specifically that point to this. When Calanthe approaches the table in the scene that Shaun was discussing, where she's trying to tell Pavetta to just calm down and to deal with the night, and she could do whatever when the night is through, Pavetta says something. She alludes to her mother's slaughtering of elves, and she sounds very angered by it. Even though Pavetta is unable to do anything about it, it does sound like she has very strong opinions toward the fact that it happens. And I think Pavetta's characterization, something that we'll come back to later on in this episode. The other scene that comes up is Iced. Geralt is kind of entertaining the crowd, and Calanthe asks Geralt to tell them about his adventures at the edge of the world. Geralt tells the truth here. He tells them, Filavandrel let me go. Filavandrel had his blade at my throat. And Ice turns around to Calanthe and says, Queen, if it was you who had confronted Filavandrel, you would be the one with your sword at his throat. So this is something that we'll come back to, but it's a unique characterization for Calanthe in the show.
I was just going to get back to the disapproval, I guess, that Pavetta has with her mother, with all the slaughtering of the elves, that kind of racism. I think it's quite accurate, when you look at younger generation just frowning upon what the older generation has done. I'm don't try and force that down my throat. Things have changed, things are different. It doesn't need to be the way it's always been. I noticed that quite quickly.
Considering the state of the world right now, it's the end of May, and there's currently a lot of unrest happening in the States, in Minneapolis. This is obviously something that is important to me as someone who is a non-Black person of color. But there's something that was shared as everyone's kind of sharing their feelings on social media and sharing a lot of resources. But it's a quote that says, "You are personally responsible for being more ethical than the society that you grew up in." This is something that we'll see in the books. We see this happen in Blood of Elves. No spoilers on the show, but there's a scene that talks about the relationship between humans and non-humans in Blood of Elves that's incredibly powerful among a number of different plot points throughout the series. And I do think that Pavetta really exemplifies that ideal here. She shows a lot more grit than her character does in the books.
Yeah, I think she said something maybe I should decorate the hall with the heads of elves or something like that. So yeah, you can see she's mocking her. It's almost like Calanthe takes her hatred of elves as a personality trait almost. It's part of her personality, which is why she can't get rid of it really as part of her now.
And as we'll see, it ultimately becomes part of Calanthe's legacy to Ciri's surprise. We'll talk about that in her storyline too. One very brief scene that we see here as well, there's someone from Nilfgaard, I think Prince Peregrine is his name, and he comes into the banquet and he has a whole, oh my gosh, it's this very cringe scene, and the actor does wonderfully here, but everyone in the hall is mocking him, and he's trying to, offer himself to Calanthe and Pavetta, and he says he's from Nilfgaard. His reason for why he'd be a wonderful suitor is because he's one of 5 or 6 boys. And he says, with my potent seed inside Pavetta will produce the strongest male heir. It was a very Mr. Collins moment from the 2005 Keira Knightley version of Pride and Prejudice. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
It's been a while, yeah.
It's the same kind of deadpanned, this is why you should love me, because I can provide this. It's very logical and very linear and very deadpanned. And I felt the same kind of cringe way listening to this scene. It also reminds me of some people that I've encountered on the dating apps, and it terrifies me. Oh my God.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to somebody like that. Yeah.
What a pickup line.
Yeah, it's funny as well, the skeletons at the side as well. While he's trying to talk, they keep playing the bagpipes, so every time he tries to talk, and then shows you the hatred they have towards Nilfgaard, or they all they constantly belittle them and see them as a measly army, really.
Yeah, it's just a joke to them, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it gives us a good insight into the status quo that Fringilla's arrival then changed. From this, we can kind of assume that this banquet must have come before Fringilla was assigned to be at Nilfgaard. It's kind of confusing because Yennefer is older than Geralt in the books, but younger than him in the TV show. It shows us the status quo, and ultimately we get to see what Nilfgaard was like, how Fringilla changed it, and obviously how it changed Fringilla. We see Nilfgaard at its full might in episodes 1, as well as 7 and 8.
Yeah, they belittle Nilfgaard and it's obviously foreshadowing what occurs later on.
And it's quite humiliating as well. When he's proposing marriage to Pavetta and Calanthe, he tells them, we should unite the Jewel of the North, referring to Cintra, with the Jewel of the South, Nilfgaard. And Calanthe says, Cintra is indeed the Jewel of the North, but Nilfgaard is the shit rag of the South. Yeah. And the entire hall erupts in laughter. It appears to be very shameful. So yeah, huge secondhand embarrassment from whatever the heck was going on there. Ultimately, this is the kind of thing, though, that brings about Cintra's demise. We do get a couple of brief scenes with just Calanthe and Geralt talking. Again, we'll talk about this more in comparisons to the books, but it's really lovely to see the two of them together. Their personalities and values, I think, are relatively equally matched. And they do, I think, despite how forward Queen Calanthe is, she does seem to have respect for Geralt that is earned throughout the night. Ultimately, she invites him to that high table because she says, I believe the quote is, any man who can paint himself in the shadow of his failures will make for far more interesting conversation tonight. And that's when she invites him up to chat with her. And as they do, we learn a little bit more about Witchers, who they are, where they came from. And Calanthe asks why there are so few of them. Geralt entertains her question and says that since the sacking of Kaer Morhen, it's impossible to make more of us. And then he turns it around on her and asks her why she continues to go into battle and risk her life on the battlefield when she could just sit on her throne in Cintra. And her response is that there's a simplicity in killing monsters, is there not? So it's interesting to see her mentality there.
I think Geralt and Calanthe's personalities are very similar, but I think the reasons why they have so many disagreements is because of their situations. They're both in very different situations. One is the queen of a country, really, a kingdom, and she's constantly has to live up to expectations and has to rule and order this and that and whatever. So there's a lot of stress on there. Whereas Geralt is a witcher that takes on simple jobs of money for killing a monster. There's not much to Geralt. He just goes and does stuff like that. So I think they both have really similar personality. It's just the fact of their situations is why they disagree with each other, and ultimately they do enjoy each other's company, but ultimately they have too many disagreements with each other then.
They're so strong-willed, such heavy, big personalities.
It's interesting. I think part of the reason why they're equally matched here is because they're kind of opposites. Calanthe is very gregarious. She's very charismatic, very forward. And Geralt is quite reserved. So it's interesting to see the kind of conversations that they get up to.
That is very interesting. I was in the service industry for a while as well. And you kind of see it. The people who are drinking coffee are the loudest ones, and the people who are drinking tea are just sitting there listening to the person bitch about everything else. It's that kind of loud versus quiet, but it just complements each other so well, in a sense. There could be tension or there could not be tension, but still it's complementary.
Yeah, it's almost like they're both very opinionated, but Calanthe almost feels like she has to force her opinion on people, whereas Geralt just keeps everything to himself, really.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it. Later on the evening, the masked Urchin of Erlen interrupts the banquet to claim Princess Pavetta's hand in marriage. He insists that he can't reveal his face, but Iced knocks off his helmet in response. Urchin is revealed to have the face of a hedgehog. Calanthe orders Geralt to kill him, and the Witcher refuses. Urchin claims his right to Pavetta under the law of surprise. Calanthe instead turns her guards and subjects on the knight. Geralt and Iced defend him. Calanthe herself then ends the fight.
Yeah, so this is probably the high point of the episode, or the most intense action, sort of. It all happens very quickly as well. He just bursts in out of nowhere and immediately claims Pavetta's hand in marriage and stuff. I thought it was definitely funny to see Ice. In the books, it's a lot different, but he just knocks his helmet off and says bollocks to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, as you said, as a book reader, it was very unexpected for me because I was expecting, as we'll see, something much longer. To just have that happen, I did laugh out loud. It was a funny moment. I was just surprised by the turn that the plot took.
Yeah.
But I think it's also necessary given that they have no more than half an hour to tell this whole story.
Mm-hmm.
So this knight enters, as we said. There's a lot of tension in the dialogue, and then his face is revealed to be a hedgehog, which obviously freaks everyone out. They're not expecting this cursed hedgehog man to be under that mask. He's laying claim to Pavetta, which Calanthe doesn't like. And then Geralt is biding his time to see when to get involved. Ultimately, the whole thing turns into a brawl.
What I love about it is that it's such a fast-paced scene. Like, Geralt has to make up his mind so quick if this man is really, a cursed knight, or is it some sort of monster or something? Like, you can already hear he's made his assumption straight away when Calanthe says, she orders him. She's like, I order you to kill him. And he's like, I'm not going to kill him. So you can already see that Geralt has made up his mind. It was definitely cool to see him, jump onto action to intervene and save Dooney.
Yeah, I mean, he just barges in there. I actually watched this scene this morning. He just kind of rolls in, body slams a few guards, and then it's like, sorry for the intrusion. It just comes out of nowhere. And like you said, Shaun, it's fast-paced, it's quick. Everything happens in a blink of an eye. Then there's something that Calanthe says where she says, there's a simplicity in killing monsters, is there not? And then kind of orders the Witcher to kill Urchin. I think I'm jumping the gun, but it seems like a setup.
Yeah, and I think Geralt even says as much down the line, that Calanthe must have known that he was coming and that she was kind of priming Geralt to try to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
This is also a scene that we saw while we were in Lucca. This was a scene that they decided to show for Geralt. Geralt steps into the fray and chops the axe in half and Dooney catches it. We see the brawl break out, and then I believe the clip stopped around the time that Calanthe stepped in. So this was my first introduction to Henry Cavill's adaptation of Geralt, and it was definitely interesting to see. I wasn't expecting Dooney to look like that. Yeah, I think they did a good job, with the practical effects. It just looks very waxy. I want to rub his snout. I mean, ultimately it works on screen. It's a good scene. It's interesting because it looks like this must have been one of the earlier episodes that they shot, or at least it wasn't reshot. You could tell, I think, because of the way that Henry's wig looks compared to, for example, the Blaviken fight scene in episode 1. But the fighting style feels a little different in episode 1 than it does in the scene in episode 4. It doesn't feel deadly. I don't think anyone's really killing anybody. I think one guard takes a slice to the back of the leg. I think a couple of them get hit on the head and knocked down, but I don't think anyone's trying to really kill.
Yeah, you can almost see that Geralt himself, he's going light. He's still able to take people down, but you can tell he's almost holding back his power. Yeah, I mean, we seen him in episode 1. He basically cut through about 5 people like butter. He was obviously he's very skilled, and I thought the part where Calanthe comes at him, Geralt is going really fast and moving really fast, but it's a good thing of showing the Witcher sort of instincts and how skilled they are, because he immediately turns around, but he looks like he's getting ready to hit him, but he immediately stops right before he hits Calanthe. It's a very good example of showing how skilled Witchers are and how their fighting style is different to your casual knight or whatever, and I thought it was shown very well in the scene.
Yeah, it was a stunning fight scene.
At the end of this fight, Calanthe steps in herself, noting the incompetency of her guards. She basically says, if you're not going to do it, I'll do it myself. And she steps in, eventually crossing swords with Geralt himself, which ends the fight. Geralt and the banquet attendees hear Urchin's case about the law of surprise. So as they're all arguing with Calanthe about the validity of it, she feigns acceptance and then ultimately betrays Urchin, causing Pavetta to release uncontrollable magic in the Great Hall.
Even Geralt sees it this way as well. He says it later on, and Moisak says to him, destiny intervened. And then Geralt goes, no, it wasn't. It was a girl using her magic to stop her mother killing her lover and stuff. So Geralt sees it as a mere coincidence almost, or she meant to do that. Sure, it is Pavetta's powers that ultimately stopped Calanthe from doing it, but obviously it was destiny that happened there, that he wasn't meant to die. Geralt obviously doesn't believe in it, as he says later on. But yeah, it was crazy to see how even after all the talks from Iced and stuff, Calanthe still didn't believe in it, and she was ready to just kill Urchin at that moment. So it was definitely interesting to see that.
Yeah, it was shocking. I mean, sure, we know how badass Calanthe is and how seems like she would stop at nothing, to get what she wants, and then just all of a sudden whips this dagger out. I don't know. It caught me by surprise, I'll tell you that much. Yeah, but it also just then goes to show, I think, how strong Destiny is, because Destiny definitely intervened, even though she was scheming, planning to stop this whole thing from happening.
It's interesting to see her stance laid bare. She does this for everyone in the hall. She turns to people in turn for their perspective. Iced, he says, who are we to challenge destiny? Life was saved, debt must be paid, or the whole order of the world falls apart. Mousak says, honor destiny's wish or unleash its wrath upon us. She's like, does anyone not care about destiny? Is anyone man enough to look in the face of destiny? And she turns to the Witcher. First, it seems he's going to agree with her. He says, destiny helps people believe there's an order to this horseshit. There isn't, but a promise made must be honored, as true for a commoner as it is for a queen. Which I think is very profound. So Calanthe here says, I bow to no law made by men who never bore a child, which I think tells us a lot about her character and what she values. She puts a lot of emphasis on her family, as we saw in episode 1 with her adoration and her commitment to Ciri. We'll see this again here, as well as in episode 7. The way that she feels about her daughter, Pavetta, is very much the same. So there's an author on Twitter that actually broke down the scene and the law of surprise really well in the context of the Netflix show and of adapting to a television medium particularly. So this Twitter thread was by Sam Sykes, who's an author, and I'll link it in the show notes. And one of the things that he liked in particular about the law of surprise was the use of contextual storytelling, in which he said that the stakes, the law of surprise, is established immediately. They aren't really explained, but they do escalate, which demands attention throughout the episode. It's quite a long Twitter thread, so I'll jump down to the other section that really interested me, in which he says, the law of surprise is a little goofy, as are a lot of things in fantasy, so The Witcher wisely leads by attaching emotional value to it from the characters. For Geralt, it's worth dying. For Calanthe, it's worth killing. As he mentions, we don't know what the law of surprise is explicitly as a new audience. His point is that we get to see the emotional investment of the characters, and we immediately get an understanding of the weight that it carries. So yeah, I would definitely agree that I think the show does this very successfully. Despite the fact that we're being shown something, not told what it is, as we talked about extensively in episode 16, The End's Beginning. So this show not tell is on full display as we're seeing the character investment here in the Great Hall. And curiously, as I was skimming through the episode, Pavetta here talks about she will marry Dooney and she'll finally be free. This is not necessarily something that we hear in the books, but it's interesting to see her voice that line, I will finally be free. What do you guys think that she's aspiring to be free from?
We don't really know exactly what she's talking about. I mean, she could be sort of metaphorically talking about, she's free from, this life that she's in. As in, she doesn't want to be love a royal life where she's married off to people and she's just not a fan of it. That would be my best guess anyways.
Yeah, I guess also free of the family grip, all the responsibilities. When my mom's gone, I don't want to have to be the one to slaughter elves. That's not what I'm about. Yeah, I agree with you.
I do like how forward Pavetta is in the adaptation. Her character is much stronger than it is in the books, and I do like that she's more vocal about her desires.
Yeah, I agree as well. We actually see that throughout the episode a good couple of times. Geralt asks her this isn't the first time you've pondered about male tradition and stuff as well. She's also very annoyed as well when she hears the reason why Urchin has come to claim the law of surprise, because she didn't even like her husband, but he's now the reason why she's losing Pavetta, because he almost died and he was saved and he claimed the law of surprise, and she calls him something like your stupid father or something like that and stuff. So it's it's you see how annoyed she gets at another quote as well. She says to Geralt, she's like, if I was a man I could order them all out of here now and just say Pavetta doesn't want to marry or something, but she can't because she's not a man, obviously. She definitely worked for her respect, and it's almost like a given right when you're born a male in the Witcher universe. You have more power and authority than a woman. We see Calanthe thinking about this a lot throughout this episode.
Yeah, she's just sick of it, growing up as a woman in a predominantly male-run, controlled universe or world.
And obviously this isn't something that just exists within the context of the Witcher world too. We'll be able to revisit this theme of how women navigate their time on the continent throughout the saga as well. And it has a lot of parallels to our own world, which is part of the reasons why I find the source material so fascinating. And I'm really happy that they were able to translate it on screen and show that aspect of the continent. Anything else, or should we shuffle on?
I'm good to move on.
Let's see. Oh, I guess the whole magic scene, I suppose we should probably... That's important. We should talk about that.
Wait, which one is this?
The Shrek scene.
Yes, the Shrek scene.
Yeah, so after Calanthe goes to kill Urchin, Pavetta lets out this, like, supersonic scream. It causes everyone except for her and Urchin to fly into the pillars, and it causes absolute destruction in the hall. The effect is a little strange. Yeah, I'll be honest, in that I think it's a bit strange. It's almost like they're in the eye of a tornado, and everyone else is in the tornado itself. The wind is blowing, the glass panels in the hall are shattered, but Pavetta and Dooney are like right in the middle. Everything is very calm around them, like their hair isn't even moving. They just start spinning, and they're just holding hands and like spinning in the air. I don't know, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, it happens for a very long time as well.
That's what I was going to say, Shaun. Yeah, it's too long.
Yeah, but it was funny to see the memes about it as well, about the comparing it to the Shrek scene. I mean, it's very close to it. This is the funny part about it. It's incredibly close to the actual Shrek scene, but still, I guess it got the point across how powerful destiny is.
That's it.
Yeah, and it's showing how like powerful her feelings towards Urchin is as well.
And how powerful she is.
Yeah.
Not even having known it at all.
Yeah.
We don't really know anything about what her powers are, where they came from, what they do. The only thing is we get a single line from Calanthe where she says, like, I thought your grandmother's powers skipped you as they skipped me. But we don't really know what they are. Like, she had, like, this supersonic scream and then, like, defied gravity for a bit. That was it. So we don't really know, like, what the limitations are, the source of it. It was an interesting scene. And then we also see Geralt, in order to deal with that threat, he chugs a vial of something, or at least tries to. It might be smashed. And then he uses a sign to knock her down.
You could see even as someone as powerful as Geralt, and obviously Mousak as well, who can do magic and such. You see they're both powerful people, but they have to use all of their strength to just get through. Definitely shows just how powerful Pavetta's powers are, and who knows how long it could have gone on if Geralt and Mousak weren't there to stop it, really.
Did you have any thoughts on this scene, Christiaan?
Just big, explosive. Yeah, especially with them trying to subdue the couple, and then she kind of just like gives him this evil glance because he was waiting for a distraction.
Yeah.
There's my shot. But nothing extra to add, no, I'm afraid not.
In the next few scenes, following Pavetta's magical outburst, Calanthe shows true acceptance of her daughter's marriage, noting Pavetta has magical heritage through her grandmother. She decrees that the law of surprise will be honored, and Pavetta and Urchin will marry, as will the queen and Iced of Skellige.
Yeah, so I guess that part shows how intense it was for Calanthe even. She was like really opinionated. She didn't believe in destiny. It almost scared her that much that she's now accepted to it, and she's marrying her only daughter off to this hedgehog by the looks of it. That's all she can see. So it even scared someone like Queen Calanthe that much that she is afraid to deny it. I think that's a very powerful scene.
It took a lot of convincing for sure.
Yeah.
I guess even just also her and Iced's history, and then Iced kind of just backing up the whole law of surprise from the very get-go. I think there was kind of a mind changer maybe as well, or had some influence at least.
We had heard earlier in the episode, Mousak mentioned Iced had asked Calanthe to marry him a number of times, and she said no. Ultimately, she accepts his proposal now. So then there's 2 weddings in the night, Calanthe and Iced, and Pavetta, and as we find out, Dooney.
A handsome fellow indeed.
Yeah, we find that out.
Yeah, we also seen like Iced as well. Like earlier on when he, like, you remember when he was like talking up Queen Calanthe? Almost kind of like, I don't want to say ass kissing, but you know, like he was...
Yeah, some sort of brown nosing.
Yeah. We definitely seen that, like a hint towards it, and then we obviously find out later on then around here that they're agreed to marriage.
So at this point we see the marriage ceremony between Pavetta and Dooney. At the moment that they kiss, Dooney changes back into his human form, where he's revealed to be not a hedgehog man. After the ceremony is completed, Geralt goes to leave, and Dooney insists on paying him with something. He insists that the Witcher saved his life, therefore he owes him something because he doesn't want to start this new life with debt, as he puts it. So Geralt very flippantly invokes the law of surprise, and this backfires on him with the very untimely announcement of Pavetta's pregnancy. Mousak begs the Witcher to stay to look after the child, and Geralt refuses.
Yeah, and another little humorous, obviously, gotcha sort of moment of on where he's like, take the law of surprise, and she just throws up, and then she's like, what have you done? Geralt replies with the famous line, just fuck.
Yeah.
Pretty funny.
Yeah, the law of surprise, also known as, Murphy's Law in my dictionary. It's just irony at its best.
I mean, it's interesting to see in the comparison to Yennefer's story, for example, she was faced with the threat and she stepped up to try to protect that child. Whereas we get Geralt here and he gets dragged to this banquet against his will by Jaskier. And then he goes through this whole thing, eventually ends up with a child at the end of it, and then chooses to walk away from that child and that responsibility. I mean, there's a lot here in what the law of surprise means, and in what this means for Geralt specifically and for this child, as we'll see in the television show. Geralt only flippantly asks for it because he doesn't want anything and makes the assumption that he'll come back to crops or to a new puppy. That's the moment where Pavetta vomits, then announcing her pregnancy. It's an interesting decision here. He saw how powerful the outcome of this was, and then he just kind of did it offhand. And then it just ended up backfiring on him really quickly. I don't know if I would have expected that based on what we learned about him in episodes 1 through 3.
Especially, even after all of that, it changed Calanthe's opinion even of it. Geralt still, when Mousak's telling him about staying for the child, he still is in disagreement. He still doesn't believe in destiny, and he's doesn't seem like a very Geralt thing to do to ask for the law of surprise, but I get it. He was he just wanted to get out of there, and it seemed like Urchin wasn't going to let him go without giving him something. So he was just I'll just take the law of surprise. And then he's like, I'm not coming back here anyways. I'm not going to be claiming anything. So it's definitely interesting to see the instant sort of payoff to that of what he says here.
Yeah, and it's not he also mentions that it's not possible to create witches anymore, but a prominent reward was the law of surprise. And it's well, I'm not making any more witches, and I don't need anything. Children's last thing on his mind. Then he gets a child.
I don't know. I that felt a little out of character for me. I think that there was just no thought behind it. Mousak decides to stay in Cintra because of Pavetta's powers and help her refine them. And he asks Geralt to stay as well for the sake of that child, because he says when it's born, the bond between Geralt and the child will be extraordinary. Geralt just says no. He just walks away. And it's interesting to see, I think, ultimately what happens based on what we know about that child, Calanthe's grandchild, Ciri, and how that's going to play out. We'll find out more in episode 7. I think there were a couple of choices made in Geralt's scenes based on the time that they had available to them. So things like knocking off Urchin's helmet and also just the immediacy of that reveal. I think it makes a lot of sense when it's brought to screen. The fact that she just threw up. As an audience, we were able to infer what was happening, why it was funny, and how it affected the characters in such a short time frame. I think it was a good choice for the medium.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes I do think that they should have extended more episodes, because there are some pivotal moments that in my personal opinion should have been in the show. But to me, as long as it really gets the point across and not in a really lazy way or anything, I don't think the way they did it in the show was bad at all. It's just, for a lot of people that have read the books, it's a lot more in depth in the books, this whole story. It's all just very to the point in the show. And I get it's for time reasons, but still, it would have been cooler, in my opinion, to see some of the scenes from the books in the show.
Yeah, I agree fully. They did super well, I think. Everything had a sense of urgency. Those fast-paced movements, they all made sense. The big reveal, the quick cuts to this, the quick cuts to that. It all made sense in the long run when you look at it, because you realize the urgency and the importance of this whole scenario, and especially that explanation that you posted here with the law of surprise. They did it so well, I think. I mean, definitely things could have been added. It's a big difference. If you look at the book and you look at this scene, it's there's a huge difference, in events. But it still makes sense. The story comes across, and it comes across really strong.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be able to talk about the changes in adapting A Question of Price from the books to this episode. Before we get to Ciri's storyline and our discussion of adapting the books to screen, we're going to break the episode here. When we come back, Christiaan, Shaun, and I will continue our discussion of Banquets, Bastards, and Burials. Thanks for joining us at the Breakfast Table. For show notes, transcripts of each episode, and complete list of our social platforms and listening services, head over to breakfastandbeauclair.com. Breakfast and Beauclair is created by Alyssa from GoodMorhen and it's hosted by Alyssa with the Times New Toussaint, news segment by Lois Mitchell-Flix. The show is edited by Alyssa with the Breakfast and Beauclair theme by Mojo Filter Media and the Times New Toussaint theme by Bettina Campomanes. Breakfast and Beauclair is produced by Alyssa in New York City with Louise of Covier, the owner of the Churlish Porpoise, Eric Sagodling, Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob B, Julie Sylvia Skellige, Jameson Ava of Gullet, B Haven of the Edge of the World, Jacob Meeks, Sebastian von Novigrad, Charlotte Megaberg Lamrai, Red Kite, the Original Roach, Ariel Kitty, the One True Chef, Dustin, and Chris K of Covier. Special thanks to Christiaan and Shaun for joining us for this episode and our international Hanza for their support.